Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Stamp Chat. My name is Heidi Rhodes. Our presenter tonight is Mr. Clarence McKnight. McKnight began collecting as a young adult after he was inspired by a trip to Ellis Island. When his son entered pre-K, Clarence began coming into his son's classroom to teach using stamps. As his son grew older, Clarence became a fixture in the school where he facilitated 2 stamp club meetings twice per week for 8 years. His wife, also a teacher, encouraged his outreach efforts and incorporated her husband's passion into her classroom. Clarence, aka the Stamp Man, enjoys sharing exhibits in public spaces. His exhibitions have been featured and hosted by libraries, colleges, numerous schools along the Eastern Seaboard. Clarence's love of learning inspires him to create these traveling stamp exhibits, citing that as you learn, you grow. The joy he sees in kids and in adults when he's teaching them through stamps is very fulfilling. McKnight is an active member as well as the webmaster for ESPER at the Ebony Society of Philatelic Events and Reflections. You can find them at esperstamps.org. They are an APS affiliate. Stamp Chat is a production of the American Philatelic Society since 1886. The APS has served collectors with the services and support that they need. With membership starting at just $25 per year, you can enjoy 135 years of fellowship in the hobby and start taking advantage of member benefits now. So visit stamps.org to apply today. And now for Clarence the Stamp Man with his presentation, Slavery and the Civil War Rights Movement on Stamps. Thank you, Clarence.
You're welcome. Is it in the mode? I don't see anything.
Yep, you're on. I see your presentation.
But it's not, hold on. It's in beginning the mode, but it's not moving.
All right, do you wanna close out and start again?
Yeah, let me close out. Sorry about that, guys. Let me close out the open up again.
Felix was just saying top screen. Thank you. Hi, Felix from Mississippi. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'll let everybody enjoy the Zoom background that Clarence inspired me to use. I know I look like I have no hair, but I wanted you guys to see the APC. Of course, it's in a springtime, so we don't exactly look like that, but we're happy to report that all of the snow has melted.
Can you see it now? Oh, you can see the slide?
No, are you sharing your screen?
Hold on, let me get out of here. Hold on a second. Let me go. Okay, let me go back to share the screen again.
Looking good. Thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Clarence McKnight. The Atlantic slave trade. The first African Americans brought to the Americas in 1619 from a Dutch ship that brought 20 African slaves on the shore of British colony of Jamestown, Virginia. The Middle Passage. The Middle Passage was a stage of the triangular trade in which millions of Africans were forcefully transported to the New World as part of the Atlantic slave trade. Triangular trade slave across the Atlantic. Triangular trade worked in the following way. On the first leg, merchant ship brought European goods. These goods include ammunition, alcohol, indigo, textiles, and other goods made from factories all over Europe and brought to Africa. In Africa, the merchant traded these goods for slaves. On the second leg, known as the Middle Passage, the slaves were transported to the Americas. There, the slaves were exchanged for sugar, molasses, other products manufactured by plantation owners of the Europeans. This next slide shows slaves basically walking out of the forest, being escorted by the captors. Sometimes it take a couple of days to come out of there. It all depends on where they was picked up at. Slave fort in Senegal. This fort made it much easier for the slave ship to dock and pick up the slaves. Cape Coast Castle in Ghana. This was the castle where the slaves would come and spend the night there before they go on the journey to Americas. This is called Cape Coast Castle, door of no return. Once you pass these doors, you are on your way out of Africa and on your way to the New World. Slave life during the voyage. Each ship carried several hundred people, about 50% of whom died during the journey. Their bodies were thrown overboard. Captives were fed twice a day and expected to exercise, often forced to dance while in shackles, or usually shackled to another person. They were kept in a hole in the ship for 16 hours a day, or above deck for 8 hours. Slaves in Brazilian market. This is what a basic market looked like back in the day. They would come there, they would auction them off. Some of them will go from there to another location. But Brazil was one of the biggest slave owners in the world. 97% of slaves brought to South America and the Caribbean. Of that 97%, most of them ended up in Brazil. 3% went to the Americas. Slaves came from Senegal, the west coast of Africa, the Ivory Coast, Gambia, and Ghana, because it was the fastest route to the Americas. Basically, let's get some facts. That's a tri-Atlantic slave trade, segment of the global slave trade, transported between 10 million and 4 million enslaved people across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas from the 1600 to the 19th century. Slave plantations. The first one was a slave house down in New Orleans. The second one is in South Carolina. Most of the floors are basically hard floors. Some of them brought straw in sometimes to sleep on the floor because they didn't have mattresses back in that time period. Okay, this following industry where the slaves produced products: sugarcane, pick cotton, and tobacco industry. Both the industry brought a lot of money to the industry. Most of the slave owners were basically companies who owned these slaves. And you heard years ago about old money. Old money means money that came from many years ago. I bet a lot of money came from slavery. Advertising slaves for sale. There's two examples of the slave for sale signs. Auction. One's the auction, and one is just a regular item, regular spot for them to sell them. This was a slave auction house down in Richmond, Virginia. Now, some slave auctions are held outdoors, depending on the size of the group that they brought in. This one may be held inside. In 1840 and 1850, the last slaves in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island either died or were emancipated. As a result, the only northern state where slaves continued to exist after 1850 was New Jersey. where it was limited to slaves born before 1805. Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Lincoln on July 1st, 1863. The proclamation issued only 2 years into the Civil War, declared that all states and the rebel states of the Confederacy are and therefore shall be free. This stamp represents the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. The gentleman on the right-hand side, his name is Greg Ogden. This was the first stamp ever designed by African American. The next stamp celebrates the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. It was issued in 2013. Now, I'll talk about these stamps because a lot of people here are not stamp collectors on this tonight, probably not. A lot of my family's on here. They don't know about stamps at all. I'm happy to join. The 13th Amendment, passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865, and ratified on December 6, 1865. 13th Amendment abolished slavery in all the states. Frederick Douglass argued against slavery and equal rights with such clarity and precision that he earned reputation as American predominant African-American abolitionist during the 19th century. Harriet Tubman, she was the first woman on a stamp as part of this Black Character series. She basically was one of the best abolitionists at the time. Born into slavery, she escaped and made 13 missions to rescue approximately 70 enslaved people, including her family and friends. Juneteenth. Juneteenth actually was the last state to free slaves. June 19th, 1965. Slave owners didn't tell slaves they were free until 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, until the Union troops retook territory in Texas to emancipate enslaved people living there. Juneteenth is celebrated as the Independence Day of African Americans. Jim Crow. I can attest to Jim Crow. I was a little kid back in that time. Jim Crow was a law where a collection of states and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. The law existed for over 100 years, from the post-Civil War era to 1965. The main reason for having Jim Crow law was to basically to make sure to marginalize African Americans by denying them the right to vote, hold jobs, get education, and other opportunities. Those who attempt to defy Jim Crow law often face arrest, fines, jail, sentences, violence, even death. As you can see right now on the picture here, you see 3 signs: colored waiting room, white and black, white and colored water fountain. The one on the top left-hand side says, "No dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans." For the non-stamp collector, the first African American on the stamp was for Booker T. Washington. It was part of the famous American series. Booker T. Washington was also the leader of the Tuskegee Institute, a cause for teaching Blacks. The Civil Rights Movement. Civil rights movement of the United States was a decade-long campaign for African Americans to end institutionalized racial discrimination. Some of the famous female activists: Ida B. Wells, an investigative journalist, educator, and earlier leader in the civil rights movement. She spoke out a lot against lynching, and she was forced to leave town when she was threatened, her life was threatened. Billie Holiday was a singer in the jazz era. Her song, Strange Fruit, spoke against lynching. She was on tour one day and she was riding through a southern town. She found some African Americans hanging from a tree, And that really touched her heart. She wrote the song Strange Fruit. And because of that, a song, the US government basically following her and trying to, they was basically harassing her because of that. Mary McLeod Bethune, an educator, stateswoman, philanthropist, humanitarian, and civil rights activist. She also was founder of a school in her name in Daytona Beach, Florida. Dorothy Heights. Dorothy Heights was a African American civil rights and women rights activist. She focused on the issue of African American women, including unemployment, literacy, voter awareness. In 1963, was one of the ones that organized the famed March on Washington. These stamps is for the More Perfect Union. More Perfect Union comes from the Constitution of the United States preamble. We the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union. So, to form a perfect union stamp recognize the courage and achievement of men and women who during the years of civil rights movement struggled to bring the vision of our founding fathers close to reality. Okay, 1948 Executive Order 9981. President Truman issued this order mandating full integration into the military branch. The Tuskegee Airmen was an all African-American flying unit in the military. They served in World War II. The squadron was commissioned by the War Department under increased pressure from the NAACP. They flew over 1,500 missions, destroyed hundreds of enemy aircraft without even losing a bomber. The stamp on this left-hand side is the same plane that they used the mission, and it got the name of the Red Tail. Montgomery Boycott. After Rosa Parks was arrested on December 1st, 1955, for refusing to let a white passenger take her seat on the Montgomery bus, African Americans began to prolong boycott of the bus company by walking or carpooling for more than a year. On December 31st, 1956, Black passengers once again rode Montgomery bus line. Now, a lot of people think that Rosa Parks was the first one to get arrested. Claudette Colvin, 9 months before Rosa Parks, on March 2nd, 1955, she was arrested at the age of 15 in Montgomery, Alabama, but refused to give up her seat to a white woman on a crowded segregated bus. For a long time, Montgomery Black leaders did not publicize for a very pioneer effort because she was a young teenager and became pregnant while unmarried. Given the social norm of that time period, her youth, the NAACP leaders worried about using her to present their movement. Rosa Parks was arrested for disobeying segregation law in Alabama, required her to give up a seat on the bus. Her bold action helped stimulate protests against inequality. Emmett Till. This is the 66th anniversary of the murder of Emmett Till. 3 months after his body was pulled from the Tallahatchie River, Montgomery boycott begun. Emmett Till was a young African-American man who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955 at the age of 14 after being accused of offending a white woman in a family grocery store. The brutality of his murder and the fact that his killers were acquitted drew attention to the long history of violence persecution of African Americans in the United States. Still became an icon for the civil rights movement. Brown versus Board Education. The unanimous ruling of the United States Supreme Court in the case of Brown versus Board Education declared that separate education facilities for Blacks and white children are inherited unequal. I was a kid back in the day who went to a segregated school, so I understand, and I went through a little bit with that. The legal team on the case. On May 17th, 1955, outside the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall in the center shared a victory handshake with his partner, E.C. Hayes and James M. Nibbett, two other lawyers who helped argue against the case. Thurgood Marshall, stamp is on the left-hand side here. Thurgood Marshall worked as a civil rights lawyer before becoming the first African-American to serve as a Solicitor General in the United States. In 1967, he became the first African-American to serve on the Supreme Court. The segregation public schools. This stamp came out in 1999 as part of Celebrate the Century series. I want to add the stamp to the series. It was a very nice stamp. I like the way he designed it. Little Rock 9. The Supreme Court declared segregated schools unconstitutional and Brown versus the Board of Education in 1955. Many public schools were slow to adapt to the new legal reality. In 1957, 9 courageous students became the first African Americans to attend Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, where they endure harassment and everything, and protests from other whites in the area who go to the school. They had to get protection from the federal troops. Lunch counter setting. This is my whole state, North Carolina. When 4 African-American college students placed an order at a white-only counter in Woodworth lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960. They sparked the act of civil disobedience in many other cities. The students waited to be served until the store closed for that day. For the next 6 days, a growing number of students joined the sit-in until Woodworth closed its doors. The students decided to suspend the sit-in for 2 weeks to give the store and the community a chance to desegregate the location. Here are the 4 students. It's funny how, to that time period, we have a black man working there, which is kind of surprising in that time period. Usually, well, basically probably a dishwasher back at the time. Freedom Riders. First known Freedom Rider occurred on April 6, 1974, when the Congress of Racial Equality, called CORE, and the Freedom Ship of Reconciliation, that's the Southern compliance with the court decision on June 3rd, 1946. The Freedom Riders were civil rights activists who rode into take blessings in the segregated South to test out the law that was passed. This is the burnout bus. They were attacked by a white mob, and some of the mobs, including kids and women, was involved with it. This was done in Anniston, Alabama. Several of the riders were beaten by the mob. Freedom Riders began traveling through the South in 1961 to desegregate Southern bus stations. Marching in Washington. More than 250,000 people marched in Washington, D.C. for racial justice in 1963. And Martin Luther King delivered his historic speech, I Have a Dream, from the Lincoln Memorial. Martin Luther King was on the stamp on the left-hand side. The right-hand side is his active speech. His stamp was issued in 1979, after Harriet Tubman stamp as part of the civil rights movement. He was one of the catalysts for the whole civil rights movement. Like I said it myself, you may say different, but a lot of people also helped him out, and a lot of them have not been named on it, but basically he didn't do it by himself, but he basically was one of the main people to help with the civil rights movement. One thing they always told him, wait, He said, wait for what? How much longer should we wait for us to get our rights? A. Philip Randolph and Harriet Rusty was two of the people who helped organize this march. On the left-hand side is A. Philip Randolph's stamp. A. Philip Randolph also was one of the people who helped work out with the railroad for the porters, the car porters on the railroads. Here's a picture of the people at the March in Washington. You can see the monument in the background. I try to get as sharp as picture as possible. And basically they was asking for human rights, not to be equal, just to have equal rights, not to be equal to anybody, but just to have equal rights like everyone else have, including jobs, job pay, no discrimination, to end the Jim Crow law, all the different things they was fighting for. The March in Washington stamps. The one on the left-hand side is the issue in 2005 for the former Perfect Union stamp. The one in the middle celebrates the 50th anniversary of the March in Washington. I was at the event. It was a nice time that day, very historical. The third stamp was issued in 1999 as part of the Celebrate the Century series for I Have a Dream. March in Washington 50th anniversary stamp ceremony. I was there. This is when John Lewis signed my program. When you go to a stamp ceremony, you get a program, and people who's on the agenda that day, the program that day, would sometimes sit down and sign it. And here's a signed program. His name is at the bottom. I think his name is second from the bottom. He was a very nice guy that day. The last one is John Lewis standing by the enlarged stamp. Protestors was attacked with water hose and attack dogs. You know, I found out by researching that a lot of the firefighters didn't want to do it, but their job was in jeopardy, so they had to do what they had to do. The dogs on the right-hand side, that was shameful. These were basically innocent protesters who was protesting no violence. Like Martin Luther King protest was all non-violence, but then you come after them with dogs and water hose. Civil Rights Act of 1964, designed to provide broad protection against discrimination on the basis of race. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law by President Johnson. Among those other provisions, the law prohibits discrimination in public accommodation, such as hotels, restaurants, and theaters. As you see here, you see the stamp by Whitney Moore Young. He's also in this picture, and Roy Wilkins, also Martin Luther King is in this picture. Lyndon B. Johnson. Basically, both of them were Australians in their own right, and on that day, he signed the bill into law, and they had a meeting afterwards. The Selma March, 1964. The stamp was on the right-hand side. People are not stamp collectors. The stamp is on the right-hand side as you look at it. And on the left side is the envelope that's hand-painted. And it tells us, there's artworks telling a story about the stamp itself. It shows Emmett Pettus Bridge. Also, too, just make you aware, the stamp collector, Emmett Pettus Bridge is spelled incorrectly on the stamp. It's spelled P-E-T-T-I-S. It should be P-E-T-T-U-S. Protesters attacked by state troopers after crossing the Emmett Pettus Bridge. On the left-hand side is John Lewis. Top right-hand side, people. What happened is that when they crossed the bridge, the state trooper attacked them, and they ran, and they said they felt like dominoes. They felt like dominoes. That is John Lewis being beaten on the ground, left-hand side. I mean, top left-hand side. The Voting Rights Act of 1965. Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law, strengthening the federal government ability to prevent state and local governments from denying citizens the right to vote because of their race. On the left-hand side, you see people are voting. On the right-hand side, it's a African-American registering to vote. Let me go back here. Basically, let me tell you a little story. During that time period, and up to this day, some states, people was given a poll tax, basically money to vote. Citizens in those same states had to pay a fee to vote for a national election. The fee was called a poll tax. In 1965, January 31st, the United States had to ratify the 24th Amendment of the Constitution prohibiting poll tax in elections and federal officials. They also had vote suppression. Vote suppression was a strategy used to influence outcome of an election by discouraging and preventing specific groups of people from voting. They even had a literacy test. Some tests would be a simple thing as, for example, if they want you to pass the test, they would say something like, who's the president of the United States? They didn't want you to pass the test. They may ask you a math problem, or ask you to say something, ask you about the town, the county, something like that. You may not know it. And this is put upon people of color and also poor whites because the other people control the election in those towns, the rich aristocrats. The first African-American to vote was from Perth Amboy. His name was Thomas Monty Peterson. I'm sorry, Peter Peterson. He voted in Perth Amboy on March 31st, 1970. And his vote, the election under the justification provision of the 15th Amendment of the United States. Civil rights pioneers. These stamps represent pioneers of the civil rights movement, other than the people you saw in my previous stamps. Because of the time, I cannot tell you about all of them because I have quite a few of them. But I'm going to tell you about a couple of them. The first one is Mary Church Terrell. Throughout her long career as a writer, activist, and lecturer, she was a powerful advocate for racial justice and women's rights in the United States. Mary White Overton, a journalist and social worker, also believed was passionate in racial equality for the and was one of the founders of NAACP. Megan Evans. Meg served with the distinction as the official of the NAACP in Mississippi until he was assassinated in 1963. Fannie Mae Hammer. Fannie Lou Hammer. Hammer was a Mississippi sharecropper who fought for Blacks' voting rights and spoke for many years out about it. One of the famous sayings was that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was because she was tired of fighting, and but she never gave up. She never gave up. Ellen Baker. Baker was a lifetime activist that made her skillful organizations. Ellen Baker lifetime was an activist and used her skills to organize things. She encouraged women and young people to assume position of leadership in the civil rights movement. Ruby Hurley was a courageous and capable official with NAACP. She did difficult and dangerous work in the South. A people without the knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Garvey. This is the end of my presentation. To learn more about Black history, visit ESPER website, esperstamp.org. You may find a few booklets that can be downloaded. Our website is the education website for students and teachers alike. Each stamp have a story to tell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clarence.
I'm glad I could see because I had soap in my eyes earlier today, so I'm glad I was able to see something.
You did. No, it was beautiful. You really took us on a journey. Thank you so much. And I was privy to be, reading the chat box, Clarence. So why don't you take a moment and just, if you can see it, we do have a question.
When I say that, I can't see it.
Okay. And I do encourage everyone, if you have a question for Clarence or about his presentation or philately or stamps or history or community outreach, please use the Q&A box. And let's get started with our first question. This is a personal one for you. What is Clarence McKnight's favorite stamp from this presentation and why?
Oh, wow. I was at Thurgood Marshall because he really, I read his stories some years ago, some movies about him. He really went through a lot, and many times that he could have been assassinated, he got out of trouble, and he stood up for everybody, right? And he was a very determined person.
I'm always just, I'm reading the Q&A box, but I'm also just thinking like it's stamps teach. I didn't know that about Thurgood Marshall. You always have something new and exciting to bring to the table, Clarence. Thank you. Next question. Did you paint the cachets that accompany your stamps?
No, I did not. No,
Okay.
I'm just a collector. Those are by Fred Collins.
Fred Collins. And if, would you would mention that there were some folks, thank you for joining us, that are not stamp collectors. Can you just tell us what cachets are so people know what they are?
A cachet is an envelope with a stamp on it. And the stamp will have the first step cancellation when the stamp first comes out. An artist will take that cachet and write and paint a story about that cachet.
So that's the cachet art.
Right,
and so all of your covers were by the same artist?
Yeah, I think, yeah, on this presentation it was.
Beautiful. We have a question from Charlene Blair of the National Museum of African Americans on Stamps. Welcome, Charlene. What did you say about Pettus Bridge being spelled wrong?
It's been spelled wrong on the stamp itself. The cachet is correct, but on the stamp, it was misspelled.
And there we have it. Well, so on the stamp.
Yeah, it was misspelled on the stamp itself.
Was there another run?
Nope.
That was corrected? Oh,
nope.
Wow.
Nope.
Another question, Clarence. Are the stamps at the end of the presentation with two persons on one stamp unusual in stamp history? I'm used to seeing just one person on a stamp.
No, it's not, because they were, instead of making 12 stamps, they decided to make 6 and put 2 people on it, because they basically work together on the same civil rights ideas. They decided to put them all together, 2 on the stamp, which will save more money too for them.
And we have someone who's joining us who said that they ordered one of those stamps, the Pettus, the one that was misspelled. So
yeah,
they have one too. Was this the first time that you gave this presentation, Clarence?
The first time. This presentation was originally 70-something slides, and I had to break it down. It was very hard. It took forever to break it down. Really, it was a lot to break it down. And so I was racking my head. I was up late at night, the other night, trying to pick which one to take out. So I made some mistakes. I had to go back and redo it again. It was like, it was crazy because I had stuff in there about Native Americans owning slaves. A lot of different things within there I couldn't really add. I had more stamps in there also too. Malcolm X, I couldn't add them all. It was very hard. It took about a whole hour.
Well, that's what we were talking about, was that we could have put this into 2 series.
Right.
So was this for this presentation, I know that you've done so many, outreach, and you are just such a, you are a teacher's teacher. What did you learn new? What were new things that you learned when putting together this presentation?
That is hard because you can't put everybody on it. You have to pick and choose who's gonna be in the presentation. You miss a lot of people. I miss Malcolm X. I miss so many different people. Harry, I can't think of name right now. I missed a lot of people on here. A lot of situations. I missed. I spoke about the Klan. I spoke about the Civil War. I spoke about that. I spoke about a lot of different things I could have spoke about on here, but I can't think right now. My mind is still fuzzy.
In
right
presenter
now.
mode, yeah.
Yeah. I have those stuff in the background too. That I just spoke about on my background.
You do, and why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then I'd like for us to circle back to what we were talking about yesterday when we had our run through. I thought it was particularly poignant for anybody who's on the call who may be younger or just stamps end up teaching us so much that we might have missed in school. And so what I'd love, what I would appreciate if you would share a little bit about like your personal history and your own personal experience with, well, we talked about it, segregation.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was born in North Carolina, and I went through the Jim Crow era, in reference to not segregated schools. We didn't have segregated parks. We couldn't eat the same restaurants. We could not go to the state fair at the same time. They had a day for blacks and a day for whites. There was a park right next to my church. We could not play in that park. There was a school 2 blocks where I lived at. We had to walk through a little forest, over a little brook of water, up a hill to school, when there was a school right next to us. We couldn't try on clothes. We could try on shoes. My mother would take our feet and trace it on brown paper and give it to the salesperson to try on shoes. The theaters, blacks upstairs, whites downstairs. You go to the bus station, you have to send it back of the bus. One of the things that I realized is sometimes these things can stay with you for a long time. I remember coming up north, I think probably when I was 6 or 7 years old. I remember for a long time, I was always sitting in the back of the bus. Until I was a teenager, a friend of mine named Lester Poole and Harold Kenner, 2 good friends of mine. We were going to go shopping and Newark for school shopping. And he said, "Clarence, why do you always sit in the back of the bus?" And that hit me. I said, whoa, it hit me. That was still in me, because to me, it was normal to me. As a kid, I didn't know what was right for wrong for the Jim Crow law, And to this day, I remember that. And about voting suppressing, I was talking to my brother because I've been doing my family tree. I always took my brothers all the time with the brother ask questions. I asked him about voting. He told me a story about my father. He said one time, my father was a sharecropper. And he used to live across town, basically back in the farm area. and they have to go to town to vote. So the owner said one day, Thomas, you know what? You don't need to go. I'll vote for you. You see, a lot of them believed that back then. That's why they didn't vote. You know, so little things like that. You know, just not being able to be with other people if you wanted to. You know what I mean? So to me, it was a norm. So it didn't bother me because to me it was normal as a child. As I look back, I said to myself, why did it happen? But at the same time, there were millions of these little other kids, white kids. We used to play in the back in the woods. But we cannot be together around his parents, or because he would have said something. And one time I was walking in the same neighborhood, and a lady took the dog on me, and I had to jump up on the roof. I was pretty fast, jump up on the roof to get away from that dog. So I went through a lot back then. Segregation, you know, bus stations, you couldn't go in the restaurants. We used to travel up north sometimes. We couldn't really get off the bus until basically we got to like maybe like Delaware, maybe something like that. We used to bring chicken sandwiches, you know, and wax paper in a brown paper bag. Cause we couldn't really stop anywhere except go to the bathroom. Then you have the white only, and you had the black only.
Well, I'm just taking pause because that's quite a lot to, you know, imagine. And I really do appreciate, Clarence, that you shared that with us. You've been able to turn that situation on its head, though, and you are absolutely committed to stamps. And what was it that you, it's almost like stamps are your tool. They're your medium. What was it about stamps that you knew you could begin telling stories through?
Because it became a history lesson for me. I didn't learn that much Black history when I was in school. It was an option. And what we did learn, or we learned about, it wasn't King, but King wasn't that popular then until later on in high school. It was basically George Washington Carver, Thurgood Marshall, his name, George Washington, yeah, George Washington Carver, Harriet Tubman, just a few people. The Cotton Gin, Eli Whitney, that was basically it. I learned about Ida B. Wells. I learned about Bessie Coleman. So I started collecting stamps. Madam C.J. Walker started collecting stamps. So I didn't start collecting stamps, but I learned about a lot of different people until I started collecting stamps. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't know history at all. And when I started learning about each one and did my research, I said, wow, I have to really get more into this. And that is my Black history educational tool, is through the stamps.
And in addition to the Black history, you have this penchant for teaching history. So you were on with us before for Hispanic Heritage Month, right, in October. Mm-hmm. You have presentations for women's history. So right.
You I have kids stuff, all type of stuff.
You're the stamp man.
Dinosaurs, I mean, things like that. Anything that would catch a kid's eye. You know, when I go to a kid's school, I would, for example, I'm doing women history. I would bring some props in with me, like an airplane or things like that, and run around the room and make sure that they're comfortable, you know, with me there. I don't want to go there and feel uptight, make them feel uncomfortable, you know, being authoritative, you know what I mean, like being a teacher or someone who look over them. I like to be able to make them feel comfortable. I don't wear a suit. I used to wear my regular job years ago. I go there very dressed casual, and I could sit down on the floor with them with jeans on. I would bring a cachet that's blown up so they can touch it. I always tell them, when I do a display with kids, I have it set up so they can touch it. I put plastic over it. I don't want to be saying no to them. Don't touch it. Don't touch that. I don't want to say that to them, you know.
And stamps they can recognize, you know, and I'm sure they're not, I don't know what it's like these days, but I mean, everybody's got like some stamp somewhere, you know, yeah. So you're teaching them how to look at it and ask questions.
Yeah, because I had my son's stamp club when he was in pre-K, from pre-K to 8th grade. I had 2 different groups, from pre-K to 2nd and from 3rd to 8th grade. We met twice a week. My job knew I was doing, so to let me take my lunch anytime I want to take my lunch and take a break at the same time. And they appreciate me for that. And later on, a couple of years later, I was chosen as one of the top dads in the company for giving back because of what I was doing.
Yeah, you know, we oftentimes this hobby is known for you know, its passion and enthusiasm, and you are so passionate about exhibits and taking them out and outreach. Before we wrap up, we do have a question. Given that so many Africans were enslaved in Latin America and the Caribbean, are there Latin American and Caribbean stamps with a Black history theme?
I'm sure there are. I have not researched it. I would say that Roberto Clemente, Celia Cruz, because there's a Hispanic heritage Spanish series of stamps. Might be a few others too. I have to go back and look into my archive for Hispanic Americans. But basically, a lot of Caribbean people who are on stamps, but they like we really don't know because they say they're Black or they say Hispanic, but underlying they might be part of the Caribbean also too.
And just for this person, if you are interested, I know that the APS YouTube channel has a Black postal history. That was from Dr. Richard Morrill. You can find that on stamps.org or on the YouTube channel. And then you might even want to check out the Bolivia. There's a postal the stamps of Bolivia. So you might be able to, because it was a while ago, but I believe that Tom Younes, I'm going to butcher his last name, but I believe that he did talk about that. And with that, I think that we are going to end tonight's stamp chat. I really appreciate, Clarence, for you coming on. If
I see one last question here. Somebody, who will reply to email inquiry to ESPER? They can send to me from the website. Go to the content area. You see all the emails there, and contact it that way.
And if you're ever looking, you know, ESPER stamps or esper.org is really rich with just really terrific lesson plans right now. You can, you know, for Black History Month, what a great resource. And if you're
I'll be doing Women's History Month also too, for March. I have a page for that also too, Women's History Month.
With Stamp Chat?
No, I mean, so sorry. I mean, March, they're going to be a Women's History Month page on
on ESPER. Okay, I got it. Okay, well, and yeah, ESPER is just a great organization to check out with your education. And then if you're watching this and you find that you love to do outreach, even despite today's with the pandemic and all, but you've gotten creative and you use Zoom and or you want to do some sort of stamps teach. ESPER really is a very inspiring organization, because people that's what you guys seem to do, just beat feet and get word out and teach. And so again, if you're looking for inspiration or mentors, I would definitely suggest that you get in touch with ESPER. Final thoughts, Clarence McKnight.
It was a pleasure. I mean, it was hard because it was so hard to try to go from the 70 something slides to break it down. It was hard, but I tried to do the best I could without really leaving out a lot of people. But I have to leave out some people out of there because to make it more thorough. Because if I was in front of if I was like doing a live, it would have been a two-part segment in which you take a break. I've done this many times before on a live setting. We would take a break in between presentations sometimes.
Well, that's good news for me. You know why? Because that means I can have you on Stamp Chat again, and we can do a part 2.
We worked out something. I'm gonna take a break for a while.
You take a break. I mean, this is definitely, this is evergreen material, and it will last a long time, and I'll give you plenty of space. But I
can see now. My eyes are clear
good.
now.
The soap came out, but you know that I'm going to be looking for you. Anyway, friends, thank you so much for joining us. Please, take a moment and thank Mr. Clarence McKnight for his time. He always puts so much effort and attention to detail into every single presentation, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the members of ESPER who are on, and to our non-philatelist friends. Welcome. We hope that you learn something new, and maybe you too will become a stamp collector. You can always go to stamps.org to check out what we're all about, and of course you can visit ESPER as well. We are proud APS. We fall. ESPER is an affiliate, so we're all together. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. Stamp Chat is a production of the American Philatelic Society since 1886. The APS has served collectors with the services and support that they need. With membership starting at $25, you can start joining and taking benefit of the American Philatelist, expertising services, and all sorts of things. Remember, Stamp Chats are free and open to non-members, so please join us again. You can find this. This will be uploaded to our APS YouTube channel, but you can find this and over 100 hours of Stamp Chat on our APS YouTube channel. So please like and subscribe that. Thank you for joining us, of course, and you can keep the conversation going in the comment box of the video and, of course, on social. We are on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, and as always on stamps.org, the APS social since 1886. Thanks, everyone, and good night. Thank you so much, Clarence.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, everybody. Thanks for checking in on us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.